There we go. Now we're live, and I never know what to say right now because, is anybody here? I mean, nobody's here. That's why it says 0 viewers, but
yeah,
it takes me so. Come on. There you go. Trying to be ready. Oh, why is this not? I'm useless when it comes to technology.
Hey, better than me. I would have never figured out how to post any of this stuff, honestly.
All right. Now I'm going to throw this in the Facebook group so everybody out there can see it. Gotcha. Published on Facebook. So hopefully people are going to start tuning in soon. And if you want to grab that and throw it on Twitter.
Yep.
Can you do that easily while we get this show on the road? Can you multitask on that? Because I sure as hell can't.
Wait, you mean post the link on Twitter? Well, you just posted it from your personal account, so I can just retweet it and say.
I did post it from a personal account?
Yeah.
Well, all right. I guess I did something cool with technology. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It says I started a live stream on YouTube.
Weird. That's cool. Well, it's on Facebook and now it's on Twitter, so we're going to get this show officially started here. So we'd like to welcome everybody into another episode of the Eurosnob Podcast. I'm Ian, and joined tonight by Alex. How you doing?
Not too bad, buddy. How about yourself?
Hey, man, I can't complain. Keeping busy with the new job, finishing up the kitchen. So
all adult stuff, right?
Oh, it's all adult stuff, and it's just a matter, it kind of makes you wonder, like, why the hell does anybody ever want to be an adult? Like, when we're 16, 17, you say, man, I just can't wait until I'm 21, 22, and I can be an adult.
Yeah, if you could go back in time and tell younger you, like, slow your roll,
Yeah, hey, but it's all good, man. There's some real exciting times going, so I'm sure there'll be more to come out about that in the very near future. But on to subjects that are gonna, interest everybody else here, not just us. Arsenal in the U.S. That's what we got going for you guys tonight. We're gonna hit a little bit of Arsenal stuff for the first 2/3 of it, and we're gonna come strong on a little bit of U.S. soccer at the end. So if you're a U.S. soccer person tuning in for this, stick around. I promise you won't be too bored by the Arsenal stuff, but we will get to some U.S. stuff for you. Hopefully you won't be too bored. So, I mean, who can ever be bored with Arsenal, though? I mean, they're always up to something, making it interesting, right?
Well, no, bored is never a word I could use. I could use exasperated, frustrated, angry, disappointed, perturbed. I swear I'm not looking at thesaurus.com and just typing in stuff.
You took AP English.
I got a 3 on that test out of 5, so obviously I didn't take it too well. But yeah, it's been a tough time to be an Arsenal fan past few years. I was gonna say past few weeks, but no, past few years, and kind of summing up the recent problems with Arsenal on the pitch, and certainly going to get into the transfer stuff as well. But on the pitch, knocked out of the FA Cup by Nottingham Forest, a loss in the Premier League to Bournemouth. I don't know where to start, honestly. I really don't. And I know you and I were kind of talking off camera about how these losses affect us, or if they affect us anymore. But just kind of starting with the FA Cup result, just because we are the holders of that trophy. We obviously won't be retaining it. We managed to make Eric Lehigh, who wasn't good enough for the U.S. under Jurgen Klinsmann or Bruce Arena, we managed to make him look like Dani Alves in his prime. So that took some skill. So big props to the Arsenal squad for making that happen. What is your feeling just about getting knocked out of the cup? Were you surprised? I mean, nothing with this club should surprise you, though.
No, I mean, I'm certainly not surprised. They've kind of we've shown that fragility for years, especially when we come up against clubs that we really should beat. After seeing the lineup going into the game, I remember the lineup correctly. I don't think I don't think it instilled a whole lot of confidence going into it. But hey, I mean, at least we can focus on winning the title, right? We saw.
Oh, you mean that? Yeah, that
we can
shit.
put all our attention into that and don't have to worry about midweek games, or the FA Cup games. Yeah, no, that ship sailed a long time ago.
Yeah, that ship was like the Titanic. It never had a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. Did I see that game? No, I did not. Am I glad that I didn't see the game? Very, very glad. I can't explain how glad I am that I didn't have to see that game. But yeah, I mean, you kind of said it right there. We made Eric Lehigh look like a superstar and let him score a worldie. And what more do you need to say about that game?
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up the lineup. When it came out, I wasn't surprised with the lineup. I was surprised we didn't have a single option on the bench to kind of change the game, though. Because I do feel like, yeah, it's good to have youth players on the bench, in case you get out to a big lead, you can sub off some of the more established guys, get some of the youth players the experience. But I feel like you still sort of had one rescue option on the bench, whether it was an Ozil or Alexis or Lacazette, just someone where if you were down late, you bring them on. As opposed to having to rely on Nketiah and I don't even know who we brought on in that game, but I mean it was a mess, and it felt weird from the first whistle. We couldn't string passes together. I think Welbeck and Iwobi. The less I say, the better.
You say it's just funny. You said that we couldn't string passes together, and then you mentioned Welbeck and Iwobi right after that, and
it's almost like there's a correlation there.
Right. I don't think that needs any further explanation. I think that says it all right there. You look at those two alone, man.
It's funny because I mean Welbeck has never been a good technical player, but he was always at least able to provide something in the way of like his athleticism and his work rate and his pace, but I don't think he has that anymore. Just with all the injuries he suffered recently, the knee injury, of course, that kind of limits your explosiveness. And Iwobi, I'm honestly not sure what has happened to that guy. I know our buddy Bill is not a huge Iwobi fan, and he's quite vocal about that on Twitter. But I always try to stick up for Iwobi because I like to stick up for young players, and I do. I always think that there's ways to keep them going even during these more difficult times. And to his credit, he's shown that ability to make those killer passes. But my God, he was poor in that game, and even in the Bournemouth game, yes, he did. He did set up Bellerin with that great chance to equalize, and then of course. It all went to shit after that anyway. So, or not to equalize. Sorry, we took the lead off of the Bellerin goal, but I'm switching games here. But just with the Nottingham Forest game, it was just one of those things where this is one of our better chances at a trophy. Why did we look so flat? I know the personnel didn't help. I know we played a few young guys out of position, but I struggle to understand the mentality of the manager on that one, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know the reasoning why. I mean, why he went with the lineup he did. I know we had a couple guys that are hurt, which is a big deal. I mean, I believe we were without Koscielny. I believe Ozil still was hurt. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. It was Koscielny, Ramsey, Ozil. I mean, when you have a squad that really isn't very deep to begin with and you're missing that quality, I mean, it's tough to replace them when you don't have the options to begin with. I mean, even with a completely healthy squad, like, who's behind them? Wilshere, Maitland-Niles. I mean, when you're that quickly to that level of player, I mean, Alex Iwobi into the lineup playing, I don't know what position. I don't think he had a position. And not necessarily, I mean, from the little bits that I did see about the game, I kind of watched a little bit, but not actually when it happened. But I mean, it's just looking at the personnel that he has at his disposal, the manager. I mean, I don't really know where else he goes with it if he's going to try and rotate a little bit. And even if he wasn't, because I don't know that he necessarily, I don't know. It's just a selection issue. It's a squad depth issue for me more so than anything else.
Yeah, but I mean, I still, like I said, I still think you need one rescue option on the bench. I mean, I don't think you go into a game like that just assuming that you're going to jump out to a lead. So we, the only people we need on the bench are youth players. Now, granted, like you said, I'm going to correct myself from earlier. I think Ozil was injured, but I think Alexis and Lacazette were both healthy. I know Giroud was out, and that kind of changes things. So maybe you don't want to risk Lacazette. I really don't understand the thinking, but even so, the 11 on the field should have been able to put together a better performance than that. I mean, that's just part of the issue there, to be quite honest. The defense looked fragile. Ospina is a walking disaster in goal. Just nothing about that team radiated confidence to me except for Maitland-Niles, honestly. He's kind of the one that does inspire some confidence in me, at least, and feeling like he's someone who can make things happen. But it was frustrating to see, just because, like you said, I mean, the title's gone, the Premier League title's gone, so you do kind of want to put your eggs in these other baskets, honestly, because I mean, top four is becoming a little bit of a stretch right now, and I know we're going to get into the Bournemouth game briefly, but it was just a frustrating game to watch, and you kind of felt it coming the whole game. We seem to struggle in those situations with these lower league teams, especially when we go away, at least, that they, if we jump out to an early lead, we seem to do well. But if that game is close for a while, we tend to tighten up, and I don't, again, we can get into mentality and all that sort of stuff.
Well,
but
I think what you said right there, I think you're kind of on your way to the Bournemouth game anyways, but the thing you said there about when the game is close, we kind of tighten up. I think that's really a good description of what happened to that Bournemouth game. I mean, that first half, we pretty much had our way with whatever we wanted to do. I don't remember if we got our goal in the first half or if it was in the second half. I'm sorry, let me check 1 second. It's early in the second. We got our goal. So we went through the first half of that game, and really, we were on top. We were dictating the play for the most part. We were creating chances. We looked good. But again, it goes back to just a typical Arsenal performance. And we get that feeling. I know I did sitting there. I'm pretty sure the commentators mentioned it at some point in time. We needed to capitalize eventually on one of those chances, or it was going to come back to bite us in the ass. We capitalized on one of the chances in the second half, but then, Bournemouth started to put some pressure on, and we just absolutely collapsed. It was a story of two halves, two completely different teams out there.
It really was. When we got the opening goal, I believe it was Bellerin. When Iwobi put him in with almost a perfect pass, and beautiful pass. I mean, that was a pass that Ozil would be proud of. We went up, and you're thinking, all right, now we push on, and we kind of, we'll get that second goal. And then once Bournemouth got that equalizer, you just had this gnawing feeling in your stomach. You're like, oh boy, here it comes. And we struggled away to Bournemouth last season too. But this is a worse Bournemouth team. I think at the time we played them, they were 19th in the league, something like that. They've won like 2 games in the past few months or something. I could be making that statistic up, honestly, but just don't check me on it. But basically,
don't check any of our statistics ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, most of what I say is made up, anyways. But I mean, the long and short of it is Bournemouth's not a good team. So there's no, I mean, yes, it's an away game. Tough shit. Like, honestly, you figure out a way to win that game, or at the very least get a point, but not collapse at the end, give up a late goal. It kind of reminded me of the Watford game earlier this season. If you remember that one, where we went up 1-0, Watford equalized, and they got a dodgy penalty at the end, but basically, like, Watford kind of piled on the pressure, and we collapsed. And it's frustrating when you're in a top 4 race and all the teams around you are picking up points and you're dropping points because that gap is just building and building and building. And, the atmosphere around the club is just a disaster right now. And, obviously we're going to tie that to some of the off the field stuff, with Alexis Sanchez. I know you kind of wanted to get into that and your thoughts on how all of that is unfolded, just kind of recapping for people who don't have the spare time to check Twitter every 20 seconds like us. Seems like Alexis Sanchez is on his way to Manchester United in what is basically going to be a swap deal for Henrik Mkhitaryan. We don't know if any cash is coming Arsenal's way as well. Details are still being finalized, but Wenger commented on it today, and today being Thursday, that it seemed like it was likely to happen. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on kind of the premise of the swap deal, but just like how the Alexis situation's unfolded before we get into kind of the incoming transfers.
Well, the Alexis thing is, it's interesting. I think the more and more comes out about really what his wage demands are, it just kind of makes me wonder. I mean, how much Arsenal really is at fault for this. Now, I know that could be an inflammatory statement. I mean, I'm going to throwing it out there. Is Arsenal not really as much to blame as we're all kind of thinking? I mean, in all reality, yeah, they probably are, at as much fault as we've been saying they are. But when you've got a player that's coming out with the wage demands that Alexis is, I mean, even if we had accepted City's bid in the summer, I mean, yeah, and sure, maybe he's ramping up his wage demands as he has a little bit more leverage as he gets closer to being a free agent and all that. I understand how that could kind of happen, but he's not going from $350K a week to $500K a week in just a couple of months. I mean, his wage demands in that summer, I mean, even if we did accept City's bid, which I believe was probably right around 60 million, if we did accept that bid, would they have even agreed on terms? I mean, the reports were that we were coming to an agreement as far as terms with City, and then City said, not a chance to Alexis's wage demands. So, and if I remember correctly too, it was kind of PSG and City in the summer. United really wasn't overly involved in the mix. There were some kind of backdoor rumors that maybe he was going there, but I don't know. It's not. I don't really know what to make of it. I don't really know that it really means anything. It was just kind of an interesting thought that, maybe. I mean, Alexis has clearly held us hostage. What more could we have really done about it, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I suppose it's easy to say in hindsight that you should have sold him over the summer, but I think the club has kind of put itself in a really terrible position. Either, and I think a lot of people said this at the time, to be fair, either you sell him last summer or you hold on to him till the contract ends. You don't do this half and half deal where the valuation you're getting for him is next to nothing. Now going back to the summer, there was definitely flirtation between City and Alexis all summer. That shouldn't have come as a shock to us, like that it came, and then it came down to like deadline day, and we said, oh, we don't have enough time to find a replacement. And then we went to Monaco with the last minute bid for Lamar, having chased him all summer. We went to Monaco for a bid for Lamar. And then they said, no, it's too late. Like, you've come to us with 2 hours left in the deadline. We're not going to close a deal, sending a player from one league to another. It's not even like another team in your same league. I tend to think in terms of his wages, and obviously we're not privy to the talks that were had, but a team doesn't bid on a player unless they're 99% certain they're going to agree on terms. So I tend to think that there were intermediaries at agents at play there where they basically agreed, assuming Arsenal accepts his bid from City, we'll take this salary. So I think that concern is a little bit of a cop out for Arsenal, to be honest. So I think you needed to sell him in the summer, but you needed to do it early enough where you could have put in a real bid for Lamar or some other replacement. But we didn't. Maybe we thought, hey, if we hold on to him, we can still make a run at the title because we've added Lacazette. Maybe the squad's good enough. And that quickly kind of went to shit, to be quite honest. So I don't know like how much we could have anticipated that. I mean, the cynics will say, well, with Wenger in charge, we should have anticipated. I'm not going to get into that, but we're in the position we're in. Like we have to look at things as they are now. So, I guess the thinking at Arsenal now is, hey, is 6 months of Alexis better than 3.5 years of a fairly good player in Henrik Mkhitaryan? I guess their thinking at this point is yes. And, me personally, I'd almost rather hold on to Alexis and see if you can get top 4, and then, the money you get for Champions League could be reinvested. But I also understand the club trying to get something for him.
It's one of these things, right? And I agree with you that, holding on, the reason that if, generally speaking, if you're not going to sell Alexis in the summer, you hold on to him and let him leave at the end of his contract. But you only do that if you really have a legitimate chance of winning anything. I mean, it's like any other major sport out there. Hockey, baseball are huge for this. When it comes down to their trade deadlines, all the teams that are not going to win anything, that are not going to make the playoffs, what do? They sell off all their players that are going to go to free agency, so they get something for them. That's what the trade deadline is in those other American sports. So for me, it kind of works. We get to a point right now. If you look at the table, I mean, we're 8 points behind Chelsea for 4th place. 8. Chelsea and Liverpool are on 47. We're on 39. Even with Alexis, do we really think we're closing an 8-point gap? I mean, we're over halfway through this season. 8 points is a lot of ground to make up.
And to your point, just about the gap, we've already played our 2 games against Liverpool and Chelsea in the league too. So it's not like we can make up those points directly, to kind of support what you were saying there.
Right. Exactly. So at this point in time, we can kind of go back and get after Arsenal for holding on to Alexis through the summer. You can make the argument as you will. I tend to think that it's not as egregious as most people think it is, but I tend to be a little bit more not supportive, but I tend to give the club a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt. I mean, sure, it's becoming much more difficult to do that in recent years. There's no doubt about it. But I'm not necessarily gonna jump all over the club, for the way that they've handled the Alexis situation at this point in time, because we really don't know all the ins and outs. I mean, maybe Alexis's side were telling Arsenal, hey, look, if we make Champions League, yeah, maybe I'll stay. Or, we have no idea what was actually said in those negotiations. So it's kind of hard to make that ultimate judgment. But there comes a point in time where, as a club, you need to make a decision. Like you said in the summer, what is going to happen with him, and you need to stick to it. And I think that's where Arsenal can get a lot of blame for this, is they didn't do that. They didn't come to that conclusion confidently earlier enough. And that's something that we've seen on and on with this club. Really, just look at Arsene Wenger and all the controversy, and is he going to stay? Is he going to retire? All of that stuff. The club has shown they can't stick to a decision.
Dad, the word you use is confidently, and I think that was a great word that you used. The club didn't make a decision. The club pushed off a decision. That's what they did. The club said, hey, we don't want to deal with this right now, and our plan B isn't really coming through, so we're just going to kind of push along and see what happens and hope it works out. And you brought up Wenger's contract situation. It's the same thing. Like, the club has shown a pattern of letting these contracts either run down or letting contract negotiations become such a point of contention You know, you can stretch back to the Cesc Fabregas situation. You can stretch back to the Samir Nasri situation where you let it get down to a year left in their contract. Same with Van Persie, you know, with other players too. So this isn't like necessarily a new pattern for Arsenal. And that's kind of the frustrating thing. Like everyone knew that the 1 year issue was coming up with Alexis and with Ozil. You've got a bunch of guys on this team who are coming up on contract issues. You know, Ramsey in the summer will be 1 year away from his. You've got Jack with his current contract situation. Now that one looks more likely to get renewed, which would be great. We can get into that. I kind of want to throw something at you though about public relations, because you're talking about Alexis's people and the discussions they've been having. Is it and I think Yankee Gunner on Twitter posed this question: how come Ozil isn't getting half the flack that Alexis has been getting for the contract limbo? Like Ozil's contract is at the same point that Alexis is. Why is he not getting a lot of the, not criticism, but everyone just seems to be giving him a little bit more the benefit of the doubt in terms of like not renewing his contract and not being more committal?
I think it has a lot to do with how those players are normally treated in the media. Alexis is seen as this player that will do whatever it takes to win, is going to work. He's going to put it, here comes our buzzwords again, passion. You know, he's going to show that passion. He's going to show, if you watch him on the field, you know, when he throws his little tantrums, what do commentators say? Oh, he just wants to win so badly. But if Mesut Ozil is on the pitch and he looks mad, they say, oh, he just doesn't care enough. He's just mad that he's just blaming his teammates. So you have such a dichotomy in how those two players are portrayed in the media to begin with. So, and I think, you know, like I said, Alexis gets a lot more credit for wanting it more. Again, another buzzword. So that being said, you know, I think that kind of causes people to, he gets talked about more in that way. They say, okay, well, he's going to leave Arsenal because he wants to win and he's not going to win at Arsenal. So I think it kind of, I don't really know how else to explain it, but there's definitely something there with how those players are, like I said, how they're normally portrayed, how they're, you know, like I said, Alexis is seen as somebody who'll do whatever it takes to win. You know, one of those things is to leave Arsenal. Mesut Ozil, he's laid back. He's just kind of out there, doesn't really care all that much. So he kind of, I get the impression that even when he does get talked about, people say he's content to stay at Arsenal.
Yeah, I think there's been, you know, Ozil doesn't have the demonstrative body language that Alexis has. And, you know, Alexis being a goal-scoring winger, the stats kind of jump off the page more with him. So when people are like, oh my God, Alexis's contributions to Arsenal are so much greater than Ozil. Well, if you've been watching Arsenal for the past 2 months, only one player has been shining, and it wasn't Alexis. It's been Mesut Ozil in the big games, really come into play and stamping his authority, to use a cliche pundit
putting
phrase.
His mark on the game.
Yeah, you know, showing a bit of ball, you know.
Well, I thought we went over this. No more.
Yeah, actually, accents. Yeah, no more accents. That's
because
right.
what it sounded like you said. I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say live.
Yeah, no, that was nothing. None of that was anything.
What it sounded like, it's not at all what you were trying to say, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, that was 20 seconds of nothing, honestly. but basically, I think what you brought up is a good point about like the narrative around the two players is dictating the conversation. You know, people are like, oh, well, Ozil, you know, like you said, Ozil's just content to stay in London, or, oh, well, no other club really wants Ozil, really. I could think of dozens of clubs. Sorry. We had a little podcast blooper there. So
That's what it sounded like.
But sorry. the
I just derailed the podcast. Sorry about that.
It's ruined. We're done. No, but people like, oh, Ozil's getting married. He's going to stay in London. He's already bought a house. This and that. Like, there's all these like ready-made kind of not excuses, but just like factors why people just assume that Ozil's going to stay. And he might, and I think that there's probably a better than 50% chance that he will. I know that the Sun, as shitty a newspaper as it is, mentioned that Ozil and Wilshere are likely to renew. But it's just been like a foregone conclusion for so long that Alexis is never going to renew. And maybe that's kind of what plays into it. I do think that the Ozil renewal is not a done deal, and it kind of ties into the other transfer rumors that are kind of floating around right now, and I'm curious to get your thought on this. So the rumors that have been doing the rounds lately are that Arsenal will swap Alexis for Mkhitaryan, Henrik Mkhitaryan, the attacking midfielder for Manchester United, and apparently Arsenal are also in for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang from Borussia Dortmund. And another rumor that's been going around is Arsenal in for the winger from Bordeaux, Malcolm, the Brazilian player. That one seems to have flared up for a little bit, but seems to be dying down. Maybe it's not something that'll happen this January, but something to look for in the summer. With the head scout Sven Mislintat in charge now, seems to be kind of wielding some influence there. I mean, let's talk about the Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang. Like, you're hearing that. What's your thought process? What are you thinking? Are you thinking it's likely? The Mkhitaryan one seems pretty close to done. And the Aubameyang, from what we've read and seen today, he's not traveling with Dortmund on their trip to Hertha Berlin. The management there was kind of upset with Arsene Wenger for even bringing him up in his press conference, even though it was just because he was asked about it. But you know how things get lost in translation. They both seem fairly far along. Are you still a little skeptical, or are you kind of buying this?
Well, of course I'm skeptical. It's Arsenal and it's transfers. I mean, what do we always say? Unless it's tweeted by Ornstein or you see the player in an Arsenal shirt, it's not done. It's kind of an interesting dynamic with Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang, because we already have a squad that's probably a little bit old for the way the game is today. I think I saw it. We're definitely one of the older sides in the Premier League, at least in the clubs that really matter. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, looking at bringing in two players that I believe are both 28 years old. You're on mute. To 28, 29, something in that range.
Sorry, I was doing some frantic typing, and then I realized that it wouldn't help if my.
That's all right.
Thing is
but that's.
But Mkhitaryan's 28, so you're right 28. On that one.
I think Aubameyang is
28.
Similar, 28, soon to be 29. So it's kind of an interesting thing that we're looking at these players that are older. And I'll be honest with you, one of the things that I cannot understand is how these are being criticized. All the time, all summer long, all season long, crying out for Arsenal to go and to do something, buy a player of some sort of substance. And we made, we already signed I'm not going to try and say his name, but the Greek kid, the center back.
Mavropanos.
There you go. He, that signing got criticized. And I'm like, we cry out for, we signed him, and what do we say? Oh, we don't sign, why aren't we signing ready-made players? Okay, fine. So now we have Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang linked. Oh, why are we signing players who are 28 years old? Like, look, you go to my friends just a little bit up north, give your head a shake. What the hell is the matter with you people?
Yeah, it's I'm kind of in two minds when it comes to all, because you're looking at it from an Arsene Wenger perspective, assuming, and my assumption is that he's gone in the summer. That's just my own feeling. You're buying players who are 28, probably have 2-3 more years at their peak. So maybe the thinking is, if he's not going in the summer, maybe he wants one last go around with these older players, and also to entice Mesut Ozil to stay. And maybe that's the thought process. Now, kind of connected to that is maybe my thinking that Sven Mislintat is starting to kind of take more of the reins with transfers. So maybe he's thinking, let's get some ready-made players for the next half season, the next year or two, while I implement my scouting network, start to bring in young players, but not bring in young players to a position where they have to star, where maybe you can bring them in and kind of groom them and kind of bring them along slowly, where they're not going to carry the load, which is where the Malcolm signing in the summer, or signing him for the summer, would actually make some sense, where now you have other players like Ozil, Mkhitaryan, Lacazette, you have attacking players where Malcolm isn't coming in, if he were to come in, or if someone of his stature, and he's not forced to carry the load. Maybe that's the thinking. What I would say is, it's the thinking with Meslintat for a lot of people is like, well, he's going to sign a bunch of young players and Arsenal is kind of going to follow the Borussia Dortmund model. Maybe that's not the thinking. Maybe it's just players that Mislintat is comfortable with, and he knows what Aubameyang can do. He knows what Mkhitaryan can do, and he's just like, you know what? In our setup, these guys can thrive. So the Aubameyang link was more surprising to me, because you just made your record signing in the summer, a striker, in Alexander Lacazette. So is this because you want to be able to rotate? I mean, that's expensive rotation if that's the case. Is it because you want to use one in the league, one in Europa and cup games? Or are you going to play two up front? Or maybe, and this is something kind of mentioned on Twitter, which I at least gave it some thought. Maybe Wenger's not thrilled with Lacazette because it took him 3 seasons to finally buy the guy. Maybe he's just not sold. And, that could just be, kind of conspiracy theory talk. I mean, who knows, honestly. But if you get a player like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who's been one of the top 5 strikers in Europe for the past 3 to 4 seasons, and he wants to come to your club, and you can afford it, and your fan base needs a jolt of enthusiasm, I'm not sure how you turn that down. Now, with Mkhitaryan, obviously, if we could have gotten Martial from United, that'd been great. But Mkhitaryan, at his best, is one of the best playmakers in the game from the wide position or as a number 10. He can score goals, he can assist, he can create chances. If you can get the Mkhitaryan from Dortmund, not the Mkhitaryan that's been at United, then you've got a real player on your hands. And it takes a lot of the creative load off of Ozil. So I get the thinking. It surprises me because I thought we would go a little younger, but the more I think about it, the more I like it, as long as we're not also neglecting players for the future, which is why I think the Mavropanos signing was actually very encouraging, that we're already implementing that young scouting network and bringing in these players and kind of balancing that with ready-made players.
Right. It's definitely kind of an interesting to look at. And I think one of the things that Dortmund does well is Dortmund doesn't force their young players into the lineup until they're ready. They have enough senior players of, mid to late 20s that, if a player like Pulisic, for example, isn't ready to break into the team, he just doesn't. They don't force those players in. They give them the opportunities. That's one of the things that, I think is kind of a misconception in a lot of ways about the way Dortmund is run. Is people think Dortmund just throw young kids out there all the time. It's not really true. They have a system where they have a lot of good senior players, and they work their young players into the side, and they have a lot of really good ones that earn their stake in the first team. In order to have that type of a setup, you have to have those quality first team players ahead of them. When you're looking at Arsenal right now, and we've already talked about it, we talked about our squad depth. We've talked about our squad depth for years now. Lacazette. Right now, you have Alexis for probably not any longer.
Probably for another day.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah.
You've got Ozil, you've got Ramsey, you've got Wilshere, you've got Xhaka. It's your senior depth as far as midfielders and forward. Oh, Giroud. Unless he goes for an Aubameyang deal. But looking at that, that's your depth going forward. Now, there's really not a lot of depth. So the next step is, okay, who are the young players that are filling in? Well, Alex Iwobi really hasn't taken the chances that he's been given. Danny Welbeck, not a young player anymore, supposed to be that some of that squad depth going forward. Not Arsenal quality. I think we can all agree on that. Seems like a great guy. You know, say what you want about the injuries and what they contribute to whether or not he is the quality player that we need. You know, but either way, he's not good enough. So what are we doing? I mean, we're looking to bring in Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan. Yeah, we're losing Alexis. That's a big loss. But we're certainly improving overall. So that's the way I look at it. The more good players, and I know we kind of had a little bit of a discussion, kind of a little bit back and forth about it the other day on Twitter. I'm all for it. Get as many good players in as possible, and a good manager is going to sort it out. Now, Arsene Wenger is our manager. In past years, I would have had full faith that he could have sorted it out. Right now, I'm not so sure. But the thing being said about that is, how long is he really going to be here? It's an interesting discussion. If you asked me a couple of weeks ago to a month ago, I would have said that he was going to be gone at the end of the year. Now I'm back into, I'm not really sure what he's going to do. And I don't like that feeling. I don't think anybody at the club does, knowing whether or not he's going. The only way he goes is if the club forces him out, and I don't have any faith that happens.
Yeah, I think with him going, I mean, it just feels like the club is evolving, and I'm not sure he's evolving with it. You bring Muslintat in, you bring Rahul. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. Rahul Snelly. That's not right at all. It's not even close to what it is. But
that's why I never try.
Yeah, I gave it a good shot and it went south. But you're bringing in people who are going to alleviate a lot of the stuff that Wenger struggles with, and I just wonder how much Wenger is okay with that. Like, I almost feel like he's liked carrying this extra load because it almost made him the martyr. Oh, see how much I do, and I'm still not appreciated, and this and that. So that was always my feeling that maybe he goes this summer. But to your point, you're signing ready-made players. That almost makes you think, all right, he's going to make one last go at this with these guys. If it doesn't work after next season, then he's gone. I mean, I see it both ways, and I know that's kind of non-committal.
But you can kind of look at it this way too. I mean, if he is going to go, what's more attractive to an incoming manager? A club without Alexis, without Theo, without Welbeck. So really your option without maybe Ozil, who knows? So you have all these question marks about whether these players are going to stay. Well, now you're looking at bringing in Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan. Adding those players to the mix, I think, kind of keeps it makes that job a little bit that much more appealing to another manager that's going to come in. And yes, the club is Arsenal. It's one of the top 10, most famous clubs in the world. I understand all that. But in the competitive market that is world football right now, every little bit helps as far as getting that guy that you want. So I don't know. I mean, I sure as hell don't have an answer on what he's going to do. I don't have an answer on, who's going to be running the club next year, or if it is Mislintat that's running these signings, if Wenger has just gone mad and is going, I don't know. All I know, I'm happy that it looks like we're going to bring in 2 quality players. Maybe a third.
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting you bring up like who's making the signings. Like, I don't think Mislintat has just gone rogue and is just signing all these guys and Wenger has no clue. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. But I do think they're at least giving Mislintat the authority to go out and say, like, look, this is the guy we need. And then they run it past Wenger. And Wenger's probably like, yeah, no, I could do with Aubameyang. I could work with Mkhitaryan, you know? I think with some of the younger signings, I think those are more the Mislintat signings. Like, it's from the comments Wenger made after Mavropanos was signed. It didn't sound like he knew much about him. You know, like his comments in training were like, "Oh man, he's surprised us with how good he is." I'm like, well, it shouldn't surprise you because you would have hypothetically been watching him for a little while. You know, I don't want to undersell the excitement of getting an Aubameyang though, like because I think he's just a phenomenal player. He's fun to watch. He's explosive. He's a good finisher. He makes intelligent runs. He's skilled. He links up well with other players. And I guess the question becomes, if this is all hypothetically based on him signing, of course, how do you then line up? Do you play 4-3-3 where you have, you know, Mkhitaryan on the right, Lacazette on the left, and Aubameyang up top, with then Ozil, Ramsey, Xhaka, Ozil, Wilshere, Xhaka, you know, whatever you want to do? Or do you play 4-4-2 where you have Lacazette and Aubameyang up top, you have Mkhitaryan cut in from the left, Ozil cut in from the right, and kind of tucking into midfield to kind of give you a four-man midfield with Wilshere or Xhaka or Ramsey or Xhaka or whoever. How do you get the best out of these guys? Like, what would you want to see if this goes through?
Well, to me, I playing a 4-4-2 when Mesut Ozil is one of your outside midfielders and potentially somebody like Mkhitaryan cutting in from the left, that gets way too narrow, in my opinion. Just kind of the way that I like to, you know, the kind of tactics that I like to see. I like to see tactics like Dortmund where you spread it, you spread the opposing team out. They use their width really, really well. You spread the other team out, and then you use that extra space that you create, you know, with smart runs and combination passing to cut through that extra space. My thought, and it's kind of something that I thought, and I commented on it in the last pod or the pod before, where a few games back, maybe a month or so ago now, I don't know if it was over the Christmas break or not, it almost looked like we shifted to more of a, you know, we took that top three, and I'm making hand gestures for people that are watching, but not. So if you're listening, you're not really going to know. So they took the top three that was like this, so we were playing a 3-4-2-1, if you want to think about it that way, a Christmas tree. It took that and they inverted it. Forget the hand signals.
I see it.
Right, but they inverted it. So it really ended up being more like a 3-5-2, if you want to look at it that way, where you've got your three central midfielders. You had Xhaka and Jack sitting a little bit deeper with Ozil sitting in the 10 hole. You've got two guys, your wing backs, playing on the outside that call them wing backs, call them outside mids, whatever you want to call them. And then it was Alexis and Lacazette that had shifted up top. Maybe that's just because I think it actually, I believe it was in the Chelsea game, because Ozil was dropping a lot deeper than he normally does, was getting the ball a lot more centrally. So that's kind of one of the things that I liked about that game, is that he was more involved in the center of the pitch. So I think if you do bring in somebody like that, I think that formation accommodates it well, especially with Alexis going out. So, for example, you would be looking at Aubameyang and Lacazette up top, Ozil in the 10 hole behind them, Xhaka and Wilshere or Ramsey, whoever you want to play there, behind Ozil and the two center midfielders, Mkhitaryan on the outside left, and Bellerin, Maitland-Niles. You know, you could move Kolasinac when he's healthy into the left. So it does give you a little bit more options than those wing backs, depending on if you want to keep it a little bit more defensive, a little more attacking, so on and so forth. So I think that, assuming that Arsenal will keep a back three, because Arsenal hasn't shown any proclivity to really change that this season, that would be the way that I would line up. I think that gets your best players on the field, and it gets them in as close to a position for them to succeed as possible.
Yeah, I mean, with the three at the back, I mean, I just don't love it, to be quite honest. And
Right, but we can agree that it's not going anywhere, at
oh
least
yeah,
not this season.
yeah, no, I think there might be something to that. Now one thing that I saw that AFC Camden, some of you know him as Dean on Twitter, mentioned that we're still pushing hard for Johnny Evans, and that one kind of surprises me because I don't know exactly what that solves. I know that Chambers and Holding, we don't want them playing tons of games at this point because they just haven't really shown the ability under this manager who is not capable of instilling defensive discipline. So maybe they're just thinking we need a pure defender in there. And, you have like Koscielny,
Well, and
Mustafi,
and clearly
Evans.
Murdersocker can't hang anymore, so you really need somebody else. We're short back there and guys that they have confidence in. So
And Koscielny's struggling with injuries too. So I guess maybe that's the thinking that Evans is still going to get a ton of games and I mean, he doesn't inspire tons of excitement in me, but then again, no central defender really does.
not too many, no.
At least, yeah, like at least not unless their name is like Rafael Varane, who I still think is an incredible player, or Umtiti at Barcelona, but obviously none of those guys will be coming our way. So
I like
maybe
the kid that just went to Bayern. I can't remember his name. Yeah, sorry. Keep going.
no, but those types of players like they don't grow on trees. So maybe you're thinking Johnny Evans with the experience. Maybe that's the thinking. So we'll see how much we push for that if we do close these Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan deals. So with the incomings, there's also been a few surprising, at least for me, surprising outgoings. The first was Francis Coquelin, who has gone to Valencia.
Yes,
And
reunited with Gabriel.
yes, and then Theo Walcott to Everton. And kind of curious to get your thoughts on those outgoings. For me, Coquelin surprised me. That I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm perfectly happy that he won't be shoved into games where I just don't think he serves much purpose. We don't have tons of midfield depth, but I'm hoping this means that Maitland-Niles moves to midfield more regularly and gets more time there because I think he's going to shine. We got a decent fee for him. Nothing crazy, but obviously if a team that's doing well in La Liga thinks that Coquelin can be an asset, it kind of makes you wonder, like, if we just weren't using him properly. My thoughts on how his role with us kind of transitioned from being just a pure destroyer who broke up attacks to almost playing as a box-to-box midfielder. And
it worked out really well.
Which, yeah, clearly worked out well for no one involved. So, that one kind of surprised me, but the Walcott one, the writing's been on the wall for a little while just because he's only been put into the Europa League games or the Cup games. And Walcott's one of those players who's frustrated me at times because, he's not the most skilled player and he gets caught offside too often. But I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for him. He's been at the club for 12 years. He was brought in at 16. He's been one of our best big game players for years. He's always been one that I never had a doubt would show up against Spurs, United, City, Liverpool, Chelsea. He scored against all those teams in big moments too. He never let the occasion faze him. In terms of being an ambassador for the club and the community, he's always been out doing things, charity work. He's very gracious in interviews. He's well-spoken. It just seemed like he's reached a point in his career where he needed that change. In terms of being an asset to the club on the field, he really hasn't been able to do much this year. But let's not forget, last season, he actually had a really good season, at least towards the beginning, scoring goals. The formation change kind of doomed him, honestly, because there just was nowhere for him to get involved. He couldn't play in that 4-2-3-1 as the outside right midfielder. So that one bummed me out a little bit from a sentimental standpoint when you go through all the great moments he's had, but kind of curious to get your take on those outgoings.
Well, what's kind of crazy is the outgoings are that we're seeing right now and potentially the rest of this window. With the Welbeck rumored to Besiktas and Giroud rumored as part of the Aubameyang deal. We're we're making all of the moves that I make in my first summer of every FIFA career with Arsenal. So sell Coughlin, sell Walcott, sell Giroud, sell Welbeck. I think it's positive. I mean, Coughlin, cool. I mean, he did well for us for a little bit, and then, like you said, his role changed and became completely useless. So good for him. He doesn't seem too happy with it, because he got a little bit feisty when a fan put an Arsenal scarf around his neck for a picture at Valencia a couple days ago, and he took it and threw it off. So he's not exactly happy with us, but whatever. Theo, that shocked me. Not because it wasn't a transfer that should have happened. It's just I always had the impression that he was going to be here forever. I mean, Theo was incredibly fast and was a spectacular finisher, but he never developed the technical and mental side of the game that he needed to be to really fulfill his full potential, I guess. But it's good for him. It's probably a year or so overdue. And I think he'll do really well out over there at Everton, and I hope he does. I really do. He always seemed like a great guy, and he was always great to have at the club. So I'm happy for him. Happy he's going to get a shot somewhere else, and I wish him good luck. And he'll probably score against us when we see them next.
That's the thing. We play them really soon, and I have
he's definitely going to score a goal or two. There's no doubt about it.
Horrifying feeling he's going to score. But
no doubt about it.
The nice thing about, well, not the nice thing, but just it kind of exemplifies what a good guy he is. Like, as soon as that transfer was made official, his first message was to the Arsenal fans, just thanking them for their support. And even people who have been super critical of him were, really effusive in their praise for him. And you could tell even Arsene Wenger was kind of not sad, but just kind of disappointed with how it all turned out.
I'm sure it was sad because he's even said it. He thinks of himself as almost a father figure to a lot of the young players. And if you think about when Theo came into the club and the other players that came into the club around the same time, that was when we were going through our youth movement. And I saw a picture. I want to say our buddy Rob tweeted the picture around of, we're going to list some names here. They're going to evoke some really bad memories, but
I'm going to start crying.
Fabregas, Nasri, Van Persie, Theo, that was, for me, one of my favorite Arsenal teams, that era of players. And Theo was a big part of that team. So, he's always going to hold a little bit of a soft spot. So, like I said, I hope he does really well over there. And in all honesty, it's going to be, I hope we're going to see more turnover this window than we've seen in the last 2 summers combined. Potentially. And it's crazy to really think about. But, it's needed. It's well overdue. And I hope that it's something that continues. The club has a lot of dead weight that needs to get shifted out. And because if you don't shift it out, you can't bring in new players. I mean, you can go back and forth about the reasons why and get into the details about the wages and how much you can increase them in your commercial revenue, blah, 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 which there's certainly, that's a summer conversation when there's not as much other stuff to get to. But since I promised earlier on in the episode, we are going to get to some U.S. national team stuff. And if we don't transition to that, we're going to be stuck on transfers for the next 2 hours because we can keep doing that. That's for sure. So the U.S., I don't know really how I want to dive into this. Part of me wants to put it up in the same category as missing the World Cup. That might sound extreme, but I think it's, for those of you that don't know, I'm talking about the Jonathan Gonzalez situation. To me, it is emblematic. It is a sign. It's a symptom of the bigger problem that U.S. soccer has, and it's that problem that I put up there with as being as big an issue as us missing the World Cup, and that is recruitment of Hispanic dual national players. It is a problem that ties into our whole youth system, which we've gotten into before. We're not going to get into tonight. But I want to get your thoughts on this Jonathan Gonzalez situation. Alex, where do you come out on all that?
Yeah, it's been a hot button issue for U.S. soccer fans for the past couple days. But honestly, this has kind of been in the works for a few months, and it's frustrating, you know, from a playing perspective, because Jonathan Gonzalez was someone who came through the U.S. ranks. He played for U.S. youth national teams all throughout his career up until recently. And then this past year, he's broken through at Monterrey, become an absolute mainstay in their midfield. And midfield is not a position where the U.S. is deep at all. I mean, yes, you point to a Weston McKennie or a Tyler Adams, you know, those types of players. That's two players. You need more than that to build a midfield, because you don't know how those guys are going to pan out. You don't know if Tyler Adams is really the real deal. I mean, he's doing it in MLS, but, you know, a lot of players can do that. And Weston McKennie has shown flashes at Schalke, but he's also shown, you know, that he's not quite ready to be a mainstay. With Jonathan Gonzalez, you have a guy playing in a good league, or, you know, certainly a better league than MLS, playing regularly for a very good team, and he came through your system. So there's no, on the surface, you're thinking, well, this is a no-brainer. He's played for us this whole time. It'll just happen. But the problem is U.S. soccer completely fucked this one up, and there's no other way to spin that. From all accounts, the Mexican Federation, the Mexican national team coach, were constantly reaching out to Gonzalez and letting him know, hey, we're still interested. Hey, we're still interested. You know, we want you to play for us. Whereas, from my understanding, and based on what I've read, it wasn't the U.S. national team coach. Obviously, we didn't have one in place for a little while, but Bruce Arena was not reaching out to Jonathan Gonzalez, and he was never called in for World Cup qualifiers. And it's not like we couldn't have used him, you know, given the midfield we put out there.
Dax McCarty is going to be much more effective.
Yeah, exactly. We need that. We need that CONCACAF experience. Well, someone tell me how that worked out. You know,
not well.
Yeah, spoiler alert, didn't end well. So, you know, then Arena gets fired, and Sarachan he didn't call in Gonzalez for the Portugal friendly. Now, I know that Monterrey, there's like rumors that Monterrey weren't going to release him, but at the very least, you give him a call. You know, you at least let him know, hey, I know you can't come in, but we're still really interested. We want to have you. Have people in the program reach out. It's really quite simple. Make the guy feel valued, because, you know, I look at it like college football recruiting, for just kind of as a parallel. You know, high school recruits feel ties to tons of different programs. It's up to you as a recruiter to say, like, hey, look, you can be part of something here. You can be part of, and I'm a Gator fan, so I'll just use this as an example. You can be part of the Gator Nation. You can be part of our program. I know you really got along with these other coaches at other programs, but if you come here, we're going to build around you. We're going to make you a star. We're going to make you feel valued. Now, granted, nationality is a little bit different. You know, it's a little bit of a deeper tie, but it's the same basic premise. Like, to act like the U.S. is somehow above recruiting players, and this is kind of something I've seen, which I'll get into, but like this idea that, like, oh, well, if you excuse me, if you feel American, you know, then you should play for us. That's not how it works. You know, you can have ties to different countries. And, you know, I think Hercules Gomez actually said that. He said, you know, it was Hugo Perez, and Hugo Perez has been involved with the U.S. national team setup for a long time. And he said, you know, that he wasn't born here, but he was young. He played in the national team. And, you know, each culture is different. So you can't say that you're going to do it just one specific way. Like, each player needs to be kind of treated as their own individual. And Herculez Gomez said, you know, people don't understand what it's like to be a dual national, what it is to be a Mexican American. And then he said, you know, like for Herculez Gomez, he said, my wife is Mexican. My daughter was born in the States. My parents were Mexican immigrants. I was born in the States. I have love for both countries. So it's not just saying like, oh, well, I feel American, so I'm going to play for America. You can have legitimate ties to both countries. So this idea that people are throwing out, well, like, and it's predominantly coming from the usual suspects in the U.S. soccer media, like, oh, well, he didn't feel American, so it's better we don't have players like that. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. You have ties to different countries, so you have to make players feel valued. And U.S. soccer didn't do that. And, you know, the Mexican Federation did. And, you know, I forget who it was, but someone said, you know, we lost Jonathan by our own arrogance or like our own kind of incompetence. Like basically we're neglecting the Hispanic community. Like it's emblematic of a larger problem, like you mentioned.
I want to say that was either Winalda or Martino, I believe. I think it was Kyle Martino, because he did, to his credit, come out pretty strong against the U.S. Federation about this.
Because I think, I mean, people, you said like it's sort of like not making the World Cup, and you kind of tempered it by saying, well, maybe it's not that severe. I would argue it almost is, because it's simple. It's kind of symbolic of a deeper issue where you're neglecting a community, and these are all players who could be major assets to you. And if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read this article by Kevin McCauley. I retweeted it earlier today, and it's called "The Old Boys Club: How U.S. Soccer Ignores Talented Players from Underserved Communities." And they talked to Herculez Gomez. They talked to Hugo Perez about specifically the Hispanic communities and like how these individuals have ties to multiple countries. And we're not doing enough to target these players. And they bring up the, what is the academy? It's called Sueño Alianza. So that is I don't know if it's an event. It's an organization that runs free pay-to-play soccer camps, mostly aimed at Hispanic youth. So that's where Jonathan Gonzalez was actually discovered, you know, in terms of Monterrey signing him. And basically they're saying that, you know, the U.S. doesn't really do enough to get out to these events. Like the Mexican club scouts and their federation pay to go to these events week in, week out, and U.S. soccer is not doing that. So you're missing out on all these different players, because I don't know why. And I don't know why MLS clubs aren't getting out there. And I can't speak to the reason that is, but I know I'm getting ranty, so I'm gonna let you jump on this for a little while, because it frustrates me when such a significant potential part of your player pool is being neglected to the.
Well, look, I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into it. First of all, the fact that our media, which if our talking head media is saying it, our federation believes it, because they say what the federation wants them to say. So the fact that as a federation, we can sit here and look at the product we put out on the pitch, look at where we are compared to the rest of the world, and say, you know what? We're fine. We're good enough doing what we're doing. We don't need these other players. We'll be fine with the players that want to come and play for us. In what world are we at that level? That's the first problem. The second problem, the federation comes out, oh, there's no, players don't slip through the cracks in the U.S. We get everybody. You just lost one of your predominant youth players who was in your system for years. He just slipped through the crack to your biggest rival. And you're going to sit here and tell me you're not missing out on kids that are playing, and that youth players aren't slipping through the cracks? Youth players you've never seen before or never found before? Like, it's absolutely astounding just how incompetent every person in charge of U.S. soccer is right now. And that's really where it comes down to. And it's that's why we missed the World Cup. I mean, look at the players that we kept calling in over and over and over again. And just kind of out of curiosity, I went back and I listened to a little bit of a podcast that I did a little over a year ago when I had a conversation with John Townsend, who we actually saw was just interviewing Eric Winalda last week or something. And I kind of listened to little bits and pieces of the conversation that we had. And we talked about it. It was right after Klinsmann got fired and Bruce Arena got hired. And honestly, we were both very, very wrong because we assumed the U.S. would qualify. We were like, it won't be a problem. They'll qualify no matter what. So, old takes exposed on Twitter here. There you go. But some of the things that were kind of brought up in that conversation about how, some of the things that Klinsmann wanted to do with our team as far as transitioning to a different type of player, and that generation of players that he needed to really step up to take the team to the next level. The Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, like that age bracket of player that has gone absolutely MIA since coming back to play in MLS. And there's absolutely no denying that was the case. And something that we talked about in that podcast, that when's the last time Michael Bradley did anything good? It was when he was still at Roma. The last time he was anything, Josie Altidore, the last time he was good for the national team was when he was still playing in, where was he, in the Netherlands?
Yep, AZ Alkmaar, yeah.
Thank you. So, it's a problem that, and I'm not going to say that's why Klinsmann failed. Klinsmann had his issues. But the fact, the point of bringing all that up is look at it ties into our player pool. Those players were an issue for Klinsmann. They were one of the reasons why we were in the position we were in to begin with, that we had to fire Klinsmann and bring in Bruce Arena. And then those same players didn't perform when all we needed to do was beat Trinidad and Tobago, get a point. Those players didn't show up. And it begs the question of, it kind of ties into the whole thing about how do we think that we're too good for these dual national players that we're missing? How do we think we're too good to not dump all kinds of resources into scouts? We have one singular full-time scout that works for the U.S. Soccer Federation in this country. I want to make sure everybody heard that correctly. One, not 100, not 1,000. One singular individual. And the Federation talks about, one of the problems, one of the difficulties, they don't say problems, they say difficulties, is that this country is so big. But that being said, nobody slips through the cracks. One of the things that having lots and lots of scouts do, it ties into what you said about staying in contact with that player. What is one thing that everybody in this world wants? They want to feel wanted. Right? If you're trying to make a decision, let's just say it's in everyday life, you're looking at jobs. You've got job offers from two different companies. And you say, one company, when you went for your interview, the CEO came and met you at the front door, shook your hand. The CEO took you around the building. The CEO got you a cup of coffee. Didn't make you wait. And the other one, you go in, you sit there, you talk to a mid-level manager, and he shows you around. Doesn't get you coffee, doesn't offer you, food or anything like that. Doesn't talk about you as a person, just talks about the company and the job. It can be the exact same job, the exact same pay. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to the place that made you feel wanted. It's the same with everything. So there's one thing, even if they're shitty scouts, even if they're the world's worst scouts, if you have somebody that says, hey, I want you to go to this tournament, wear your red, white, and blue USA Soccer Federation stuff, and go and talk to that number 16 on that team after the game. That's it. That's it. If you have somebody where that kid is, every time he steps off the field in the tournament, is being approached by a U.S. soccer scout, and he's a dual national. Let's say he can go play for Germany and he can play for us, but he's growing up here. And every time he comes off the field, he's got a U.S. scout saying, hey, you played really well today. I like what you did there. How you doing? You know, if you ever have any questions, ever have any comment, anything, this is my card. Give me a call. You know how far that's going to go?
And that's the funny thing. Like, after this decision was made, like, some of the MLS writers were like, oh, so he changed his mind because Mexico gave him a little attention and we didn't invite him to one friendly that he wouldn't have played in.
Oh my
no,
God,
it's so much
that.
more than that. Like, Mexico had been in contact with him. Then the coach, the actual national team coach, was reaching out to him. And yes, I know Dave Sarachan is not the full-time coach. He's an interim coach. Doesn't matter. Give the guy a call. Just say, like, hey, you can't make it. I understand, but we still really want you. You're going to be a big part of what we do here. And your point about, like, slipping through the cracks, like, with Gonzalez, he didn't even really slip through the cracks. Like, this is someone we did find and we just neglected. So imagine the players we're not finding. If we're neglecting players we do find, imagine the players we're not finding. Then there's no chance to get those players. And in a country of 350 million or whatever we are, if you honest to God think that no players are slipping through the cracks because, like you said, the lack of full-time scouts, the lack of organization, then you're fooling yourself. If you really think that we have all the mechanisms in place to make sure that this doesn't happen, then you just haven't been paying attention, or you've intentionally buried your head in the sand. And especially with the underserved communities, you know, the areas where they don't necessarily have access to top coaches. Like, if you think that those players are getting a fair shake in this system, then I'll say it this way. It's very easy for people who have benefited from the system say the system is working. That's how I will say that.
You know, and that's so true. It really is. I mean, you said something about there about serving, about the underserved communities. I forget who it was. It really bugged me that I don't remember who it was. But recently, somebody involved with either the federation or a presidential election came out and said, there's not a problem with kids. You know, there's not a problem with people playing soccer. There's plenty of people playing pickup everywhere. I went to a school with, if you count undergrads and grad students, 40,000 students. Top 10 in the country as far as international enrollment. Do you know how hard it was to find a pickup game? And we had a facility that we could just go play. We could go play pickup whenever we wanted. Now, what's one of the things what's the one sport you see kids play all the time, everywhere, no matter where you are?
Basketball.
Playing basketball. Because why? There's a hoop. There's a court set up in the city. How much money would it cost for the federation to say, you know what? Hey, this community here is an underserved, it's a poor community. We're not getting rid of our pay to play, but you know what? In this area, really, really good players that we're never, ever going to see. Never going to have the money to even take them to a tryout for a development academy. How much would it cost the federation to go into communities like that and set up a little basketball court size field? Grass. Just like a hard surface with some metal nets.
To kind of tie into what you said, Sunil Gulati today at the convention in Philadelphia said that U.S. soccer has a surplus of like $150 million. What on earth is that money doing if it's not being reinvested at the grassroots level? Like, yes, people are going to say, oh, it's very easy to tell people how to spend their money.
Aren't they not for profit?
They are U.S. Soccer Federation, I believe, is a non-for-profit organization. So what are they doing with the surplus? Their very purpose is to ensure the state of the game in the U.S. is as good as it can be. And if you're telling me that this is as good as it can be, then we're all wasting time. There's no point following this program if you think this is as good as it can be. And I've seen people say like, "Oh my God, there's no need to blow up the system. It just needs to be tweaked." I don't think anyone is saying blow up the system, but people what smarter people than us are saying, like these are code. All right, smarter people than you are saying. No, but like, and you and I have interacted with these people, like coaches, like youth coaches on Twitter. There's a bunch of them, really smart people who are experiencing this. Like I've seen so many people say, "Look, I've coached this guy, but his parents can't afford to take him to this camp, or his parents can't afford to put him on this travel team." There's just so many stories like that. So the Gonzalez thing, like people are saying, "Oh, you just missed on one player," but it's okay because we've got Tyler Adams or we got Weston McKennie. That's not the point. Do you think that? And yes, I understand the size of the country, but with $150 million surplus, you telling me you can't hire full-time scouts in every region whose sole job it is to facilitate young kids playing the game and get out to these games? Like, I'm sorry, it should not be this difficult. And if you put that buffoon Thomas Rongen anywhere near anything that matters with U.S. soccer, that doesn't help either. This moron is the one who cost us Nevin Subotic. He's made so many comments about how, "Oh, we don't need this player, we don't need that player." This is the same guy that said Messi lacks game intelligence. This is the kind of guy that you're putting in charge? I don't think so. Sorry, not having it.
One thing that just made me think about when you're talking about the money that we had, and we're gonna wrap this up really soon, we promise. The amount of money that, if you look at the U.S. and I believe it's Germany, I think I've got it right. I wish I had the stat in front of me, but I forgot about it until just now. The amount of scholarship money that the U.S. has put into youth players, into helping them go to the academies and all of that. In the U.S. over the last 8 years, I think it was, we spent like $330 something. These are like $30,000 or $300,000, something like that. Something which really, when you say, "Wait, what? That's it?" And it gets even worse when you compare it to, I really believe it was Germany, and it's 10 times what we've put into it. And I wish I had the figures in front of me because it was absolutely staggering.
And the thing is, you hear the numbers, you're mentioning those numbers, that investment pays itself off down the line when 7 of these players become decent players down the line. It pays for itself. Like, people are saying, "Oh, well, you can't just spend money to solve the problem." If you invest in grassroots development,
you can.
Well, first of all, yes, you can throw money to solve the problem.
Yes, you can.
Secondly, if you invest in grassroots development and you actually make a concerted effort to do so, it's going to pay off. You might not see it a year down the line. You're going to see it 5-10 years down the line when these youth players are given the right guidance and make it to the top. And I want to say one thing, like, you and I have never claimed to be coaching experts or youth development experts, but this is coming from fans of the program who read and try to stay educated as to what's going on these days. These are problems that are very easily identifiable. If people like us can see them, imagine people who are trying to work with the system but are getting stifled at every turn. Meanwhile, you have, I'm not going to name this person because I name him a lot, but like, you have people saying, "Oh, well, there's really, like you said, that people aren't falling through the cracks," or, name these players who are falling through the cracks, or, people like that. I mean,
how can you name them if they've fallen through the cracks?
Yeah. That's like saying, does a tree make noise if it falls in the woods and no one hears it? Well, no one was there, so how would you know?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, that's always been a stupid analogy to me, but it's the first one that came to mind. But just it's frustrating to me because I grew up playing AYSO, and I would wager a lot of people listen to this probably did the same. Like, I was very fortunate to have parents who could afford to pay all those costs. But even then, like, they were both working full time. So when I made All-Stars, they couldn't they couldn't take me to these all-star games. I couldn't even play all-stars. There's families with way more financial difficulty who can't afford to to drive their kids to these different programs, to pay for these programs. So you're seeing kids 8, 9, 10 years old. That's it. They're done at that age. You know what I mean? And you'll never know what those kids became.
And you kind of talk about it, like the position that we're coming from. And I think we're both coming from a little bit of experience too. I mean, I've talked about it before on here. Growing up, I forget which affiliation the league was with, but it was a small county-wide travel league. And, there were some good players in it, but the only other option if you wanted to take it to a different level was to go and play for a premier club. And that meant for me driving an hour twice a week for practice. And then games were 6, 7, 8 hours away every weekend. And that's fine. That was something that I wanted to do, something my family wanted to do. And I was lucky enough that I was able to do it. And we played some, in the league just below the top club league in the country. So it was a really competitive league. We got our asses handed to us all the time. But you know what the difference was about that club, and the reason I played for that club, is that even if I could have afforded to play for the Buffalo United, or if I wanted to drive out to Rochester and play for Rochester Football Club, could I have played for these? Was I better than some of the players on those teams? Yeah, I was. But in order to get into that club, you have to know all of these people, and it was 3 times as expensive as it was, for the club that I played for. And was my club as good as them? No, it wasn't. We lost when we played them. They would beat us every time. But you know what? Did I get the same kind of experience for less? Absolutely. My point in saying that is you can find ways to help this out, to fix this situation. And the position that I'm coming from is I've seen it both as a player and I've seen it as a coach. I coach kids from the town that I grew up in. That is sure as hell a struggling town. It's an underserved area. And you know what? I've seen kids that had a whole hell of a lot of potential completely fall through the cracks because you know what? They couldn't afford to play anything other than the travel league, which was a glorified rec league. I've seen it firsthand, and that's with players that who knows what they could have done. But they just never had a chance. They never had a chance.
And that's such a good point you bring up. And I'm just going to wrap up my thoughts with this, that tying it to the other U.S. sports, you mentioned basketball. There's pickup courts all over the place. But, you look at college basketball and college basketball recruiting, coaches find these players in underserved communities. Like, I'm not going to name cities because I think, that I don't want to offend anyone, but just like there are areas that are just not quite as affluent where kids are still playing quality basketball and they're found, because these AAU teams find them, or they get out to these, these camps oftentimes pay these kids costs so that they can go, or their schools will pay, or, there's different ways to do it. I'm not privy to the details, but players who can't necessarily afford these things on their own are assisted in getting their name out there, getting their highlight tape out there. And then college assistant coaches are constantly making the rounds at tournaments, checking out players and visiting families, these in-home visits. Same with college football, and I live in Florida, so I can kind of speak to this just having seen it. Well, or having read about it and kind of seen it from my own knowledge of the sport, that college football programs have a board of thousands of players across the country. That means that they have eyes on all these different players in the schools. They'll communicate with their coaches. They'll communicate with principals, with guidance counselors, like they are always on the lookout for these types of players. And then they have a board. And then when they focus in on their target, they'll be like, hey, we want this wide receiver. You know, like he goes to this school that maybe not a ton of D1 players come from, but you know what? He's special. We're going to go make an effort and make sure that we get eyes on him so that he knows we value him. It's not too different here. It really isn't. You can put scouts in these different areas who just, all they have to do is go to games, videotape these kids, you know, talk to them, like you said, have a conversation, send it back to a national processing center. And then from there, guys are like, hey, this guy, you know, this kid can't really afford to play for an MLS academy. Let's see what we can do to help him out. Or let's facilitate his transition to an academy. Or let's see if we can get him a shot with one of our connections abroad. If you're going to commit to being an elite soccer program, you have to be willing to commit the resources to it. And, you know, I know I was kind of all over the place with that, but just the basic premise is that in other sports, they find ways to get these players that don't necessarily come from the most affluent backgrounds. They still find ways to give these guys opportunities. And that's what frustrates me. Now, maybe Jonathan was more a case that we weren't in communication with him, but there's so many more players probably as good as Jonathan or with the potential to be as good as Jonathan that we'll never know about.
Yeah, and I don't think that you really could say it much better. I mean, I think we could go on this topic for probably 2 hours on its own. And it's something that we'll continue to touch on, and hopefully with the election coming up, we're got to be within about a month or so now. I don't know if it's the beginning of February, middle, or end, whatever, but it's sometime in February, so it's coming up really close. You know, it's a really, really crucial time for U.S. soccer. It's going to be – this election is going to show us how serious the people around U.S. soccer want to be taken as a soccer nation. If Kathy Carter gets elected, we know that as a soccer nation, we're never going to be anything other than what we are now, not for the foreseeable future. And if somebody else does, you know what? Maybe the people inside the game really want to see some change. So we can only hope for the best. And I think that everything you said at the end there about finding ways to make these to make it work for these kids that can't afford it. And you know, like I said before too, is stay in contact. Always be on the top of somebody's mind. Be right there. What is, like I said, Gonzalez steps off a field, guy with a US crest on his shirt. Hey, played a hell of a game. Just want to let you know that we're keeping you in mind. That's all it takes. That simple. And by putting people out there that their sole job is to do that, it's going to be incredible the difference that you would see. And that's just it's as simple as that. Make that change as a change from the ground floor and just watch it start to grow. Because you know what? Once you're identifying these players, once you're finding the 13-year-old kid that's debating whether or not he wants to stay in soccer or go and play basketball or go and play football. I mean, you get kids that are great middle school soccer players, super talented, and then they say, you know what? Do I want to go play soccer or do I want to go play football? But I'll tell you what, if you've got this kid who's a spectacular soccer player and is singing about playing football, but you identify him at 13 years old, so the summer before he goes into high school, you're a U.S. soccer scout. He steps off the field from one of his summer games, one of his travel games, and you say, hey, I'm so-and-so from U.S. soccer. Just want to let you know that we like what you're doing. We want you to keep it up. I will guarantee you that kid will not play football. He will stick with soccer. So you know what? Start making that effort earlier on with these kids. And that's going to take care of so many problems that we've got in this country as far as soccer nation. So unless you have anything else on the subject.
Summed it up completely. Sorry, I'm losing my voice also, but you summed it up really well there. I mean, these aren't It's not reinventing the wheel here. These are quick fixes to at least facilitate some changes. Now, obviously, there's other changes that can be made further down the process, but even just at the beginning, in terms of not limiting yourself and your own player pool, I think you nailed it. And these are conversations that we need to be having, but more importantly, we need to put people in charge who are capable of implementing the changes that stem from these discussions. So even if it's not Eric Winalda, if it's Steve Winograd or, Paul Caligiuri, guys like that who seem to have demonstrated that, let's hope that they're the ones who get put in charge, and maybe we'll see something. But no, certainly on my end, we could go on about this for hours, but I don't want to bore the people at home.
So yeah, and I know we kind of ran a little bit longer than I think we meant to, but the U.S. soccer discussion really kind of hits at something deeper, and I think that's why we get a little carried away on those conversations. So I don't apologize for going long, because I think it was a good discussion.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people can relate to this discussion, though, because everyone is growing up around people like, man, if that kid got a shot, he could have been something.
Exactly. And that's one of the things. So you talk about it, hey, maybe it'll change. We're doing what we can to kind of affect some change. So Alex, once you give them the rundown of where everybody can find us, if you don't already know where that is.
Yeah, of course. We are starting to get more active on the Facebook page, posting the live streams there. Please like us there, share us, do whatever you got to do. It's facebook.com/Eurosnob Pod. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/Eurosnob Pod. You can find me at UFGoonerAJ on Twitter. You can find Ian at GunnersFan6. Subscribe on iTunes, Eurosnob Podcast, or listen to us on the Podomatic site, which you can always find the link on our Twitter. So just please check us out. If you like what we're doing, please let people know, and we can continue to have these really good discussions, and hopefully open people's eyes to some issues maybe they didn't know about. And certainly if you guys have input, neither of us claim to be experts. We're always hoping to obtain further perspective and knowledge. So we'd love to have people on who can provide that. So with that said, Ian, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, other than, let's keep this conversation going. I know we said it before. Somebody needs to be having the conversation, and I know that the people that matter probably aren't listening into our little podcast here, but you know what? The more we talk about it, the more other people talk about it, the further an effect that we could potentially actually have. So that being said, we love to get your feedback on everything that we're doing. We love your comments, good or bad. So from both of us here, I just want to sign off, and we'll talk to you guys soon.